Hello class, today we're going to be talking about simple interest. So simple interest, there is a formula that we're going to need to use, but before we get there, we should be defining what exactly the formula is asking us to do. So first, we're talking about interest. So interest is the amount charged to borrow money or the amount made on investments. Next, we're talking about the principal. And the principal is the amount of money that you borrow. We are also talking about a rate. This is the interest a bank is charging or paying you. Important to note that in the problem, it'll be given to you as a percent, but we want to change that percent into a decimal. And then lastly, the last thing we need to know is how much time the interest is going to be paid over. So this is how many years needed to pay off the loan or how many years you have the money invested. So you end up with this formula. I equals PRT. In the past, my students have switched it around and put PRT equals I, and it kind of spells the word pretty if you think about it, so maybe that's another way to remember it. But you're taking the principal, the rate as a decimal, and the time and multiplying them all together. So you'll be asked to find the total, and the total is going to be the sum of the interest and the principal. So just like we saw for the tax, tip, and discount, some of these questions are just asking for the interest, but then some questions are going to be asking you for the total amount that you have to pay back as well. So there's an example. There are a couple of ones that I want to go over with you guys, and then the rest you can do on your own. So it says you put $500 in a savings account. The account earns 3% simple interest per year. What's the interest earned after 3 years? And then what's the end balance? So every single one of these questions is going to use this formula, I equals PRT, or maybe you like it the pretty way and you do PRT equals I, whatever you do. You're taking the principal, which is that $500 we're putting in, multiplying that by the rate, and notice we took our 3% and changed it into a decimal, and then we're multiplying that by the time. So just to double check the work, I'm going to do my principal times the rate as a decimal times the amount of time, and I end up with $45. So the amount of interest is $45. So that's part A. Part B, to find the end balance, you're going to take your $45 that we found to be the interest and then add it back to the original principal. So our principal was $500. We're adding in this interest, and then in total, 500 plus 45 is 545. So again, there's two parts to these kinds of problems. They might just ask you for the interest. In that case, you're using the formula. And if it wants the end balance, you take that number you just got and add it back to your principal. So like I said, we're going to do a couple of these together. You'll get the hang of it, I'm sure, and then you can do some of these on your own. This first one says, determine the interest earned on a $4,900 deposit into a savings account at 8.5% per year over a period of 18 months. So first, I'm looking for the interest. It's asking me just for the interest, so that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out. My principal is the amount that I'm depositing. In this case is $4,900. My rate, I want to change that percent into a decimal. I think the quickest way to do that is to just move it 2 places to the left. So my R in this case is 0.085. And then lastly, for time, remember time is the amount in years. If it's giving you it in months, I have to figure out how many years 18 months is. So you could think, well, if 12 months is a year, how much is left over? Or another quick way to do it is to take the amount given to you and divide it by 12. Figure out how many times 12 goes into 18. If you're not sure, you can always use your calculator. And 18 months ends up being 1.5 years. 1.5. So we take our pretty formula, we take our I equals PRT, and I'm going to multiply the principal times the rate times the time. And again, I don't know how to do all this math in my head, so I'm just going to use the calculator. So I'll take 4,900, I'll multiply it by 0.085, which was our rate, multiply that by the time, and I get an answer of 624.75. And let's just double check. Do we need to figure out the final balance or the end amount? No, because it just wants the interest. If it was asking us for that final amount, we could take the interest that we just got and then add it back to the 4,900. But in this case, it just wants the interest. Let's look at this next one. Tony borrowed $920 from a bank at a 14% interest rate. That seems pretty high. After 36 months, he paid back the loan plus the interest. How much interest did Tony pay, and how much did Tony repay altogether? So this looks like that example from above where we have two parts. We have this part A to find the interest, and then we have this part B to find out how much he has to pay back altogether. But before we can do any of these, we definitely have to figure out the amount of interest. So let's fill out these blanks. Principal is how much he borrows, which is that dollar amount, $920. Our rate is 14%. If I want to change 14% to a decimal, I can move that decimal place 2 places to the left. Oops, I made a mistake. I'll take that decimal place and move it 2 times to the left, and I end up with 0.14. And then again, the time is in years. If I'm given months, I think the easiest thing to do is to take your 36 months and divide it by 12 to figure out how many times 12 goes into it. That should be a pretty quick calculation. 3. So my time for this is 3 years. Now, again, we're using that formula. To find the interest, you take the principal, multiply it by the rate, and then multiply that by the time. Principal is 920. Our rate in this case was 0.14, and for 3 years, the amount of interest is just going to be 920 times 0.14 times 3, and I end up with this 386.4 number. Remember, guys, this is money. Money has 2 decimal places. Okay, I feel like we're okay with adding that extra 0 at the end there. So that's part A. That's the interest. To find out how much they repay altogether, well, let's take that 920 that they started with, because, I mean, if they're taking out a loan, they have to pay back the original amount anyway. We're going to add the amount of interest. So add that 386.40. And again, I'm going to use my calculator for this. 920 plus 386.4. And we end up with a final amount of 1306.40. So we're taking our principal, we're multiplying it by the interest rate as a decimal, multiplying that by the time in years, and we get our final amount. So we'll do one more together, and then I'll let you guys go on your own. Jonathan wants to borrow $110 from his mom. So that amount right there is our principal. His mom agreed, but said she would add a 23% annual interest rate. Wow, his mom is trying to get a lot of money back. 23%. I need to find out what that is as a decimal. So I'm going to move 2 places to the left, and it gives me 0.23. I want to know how much he has to pay back after 3 months. So this one's going to be a little different. We're still going to figure out what 3 months is in years. So I'll take 3 and divide it by 12, and I end up with, again, if you guys don't like fractions or decimals, you can always use the resources given to you, but 3 out of 12 is 1/4, which is 0.25. So my time in this case is a decimal, which makes sense because 3 months isn't quite a year. So I'm going to use 0.25. And then again, to find the interest, I do principal times rate times time. Principal is $110. Our rate was 0.23, and our time in this case was 0.25. So let's see what we get when we multiply all of those together. We end up with this final answer of 6.325. Remember, we like money to be 2 decimal places. I want it to be 6.3 something. This 5 tells me I have to round up. So I end up with 6.33. So that's the amount of interest, right? Is it asking us for the amount of the total amount? No, it just wants the interest here. So in this case, $6.33 is our final answer. So you can pause the video, you can rewind, look at your notes, do what you got to do, and try these last couple questions. Thanks.